Hi everyone, welcome to the next session in our annual conference, Power to the Roots. I'm Geraldine Kendall-Adams from the MA and I'll be facilitating this session. I'll shortly hand over to our chair, William Tregaskes, but first I have a few short housekeeping announcements to make. Firstly, as attendees, your cameras and microphones aren't switched on, but you can use the chat function on your menu bar to introduce yourselves and join in the conversation. And please do keep sharing your experiences and links. You're also very welcome to tweet using the hashtag Museums2020. There is live closed captioning available at the bottom of your Zoom screens, as well as audio describing via the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. Please switch to the French channel for live audio description. If you have a question that you'd like the panel to address, then please share this via the Q&A function, which is also in the menu bar. The chair will put selected questions you've asked to the panel, so please keep these short and to the point to help them out. You can leave and rejoin the webinar at any time. We are recording this session and it will be available on our website in due course. And finally, please bear with us if there are any technical problems during the webinar, and feel free to send me a private chat message if you have any troubles, and I'll do my best to help. Okay, that's it from me. Now it's time to hand you over to William to get started.
Hello everyone, thank you for coming along today. This session, Power to Roots, brings together a selection of grassroots networks to discuss their work and explore the role of grassroots networks in the museum sector, asking how they can empower this sector's workforce and ultimately campaign for real change in museums. Change which impacts the people museums engage with, the people museums have failed to engage with so far, and ultimately change the lives of people who work in the museum sector as well. My name is William Tregaskes. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a co-founder of Front of House Museums. Myself and Abby Godfrey set up Front of House Museums in 2017 to celebrate, advocate, and campaign for front of house in the museum sector, calling for front of house to be valued for the work they do and demonstrate the incredible importance they have been to the museum sector. As I'm sure we've all seen in 2020, from maintaining a museum during closure to planning their reopening and welcoming back visitors following the reopening of museums, they have been at the front of our sector's recovery. Today I'll be chairing this session and I'm joined by 4 amazing speakers representing Fair Museum Jobs, Museum Wellness, Museum as Muck, and Museum Detox. During this session, please make sure to put any questions and in the chat and Q&A function, and we will pick up as many questions as we can with the time we have. Please make sure also to share the networks which are important to you on Twitter and in the chat. It'd be fantastic to share all the grassroots networks working in the sector today. I will now hand over to our speakers to introduce themselves, their networks, and to share one reason why they chose to get involved in the grassroots networks.
Hi everyone, my name is Ashleigh Hibbins and I am representing Fair Museum Jobs Collective here today. So we were founded in 2018. We currently have 5 core members and we campaign for fairer, more transparent and inclusive recruitment in the museum sector. So we believe that one of the reasons that the museum workforce often doesn't represent the communities that they serve is because of bad and unfair recruitment practices. So we actively campaign to improve recruitment practices based on our manifesto, which you can find at fairmuseumjobs.org. And that includes celebrating good practice and publicly challenging bad practice on social media. So myself personally, I was involved right at the very start of Fair Museum Jobs back in 2018, but I had to leave shortly afterwards due to health reasons. I've recently gotten back involved, which is really exciting. And I think the reason why I really wanted to be involved with Fair Museum Jobs is because I felt like there's a lot of powerlessness amongst museum workers. And, you know, oftentimes I'd been given the advice, you know, if something goes wrong or if something seems unfair, you know, take it on the chin, don't be a troublemaker, keep your head down and things will get better. And in my opinion, that doesn't actually really solve any of the structural issues behind unfair museum recruitment and working conditions. And so joining a grassroots network is one way for your voice to be heard and to make a difference without adopting a lot of personal risk to yourself as an individual.
Hi, I'm Sam Jenkins. I'm here representing Museum Wellness Network. I helped set up the network in 2018 as well, because I was going through a tough time with my mental health, and the support structures that I wanted to exist in the sector didn't. And after getting some advice at a different conference, I realised that I'd been waiting around for someone to set up the exact network that I wanted, and it wasn't happening. So I should just do that and make the leap to introduce to the sector what I saw as a need for a lot of people who work in museums. We try and raise awareness about mental health and wellbeing within the museum sector, try and encourage people to talk a bit more, stop holding things back, and to share our experiences so that we all know that we're not alone in what we're experiencing.
Hello everyone, my name is Michelle McGrath and my pronouns are she, her and hers. I'm here today representing Museums Muck, which is a network for working class museum professionals. I started the network in 2018, which seemed to be the year for grassroots networks. And like Sam, it was kind of a personal response to something that I felt affected me and was missing in the sector. And it was a response to the lack of other working class people in my work environment. So Museums Muck, first and foremost, is a network and community for working class professionals, and we offer kind of support and solidarity to our working class colleagues. And then we also have our external facing strand as well, where we work with museums and organisations to address the barriers for working class people getting into and being in the sector. And just, I guess I didn't say, I'm a museum learning specialist and I've worked in museums for about 13 years now. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sina. I'm from Museum Detox, and I have come here today just as to represent Museum Detox, but we are a collective, and no one really represents Museum Detox. We're a collective of people who people of color who work in museums, galleries, libraries, archives, and the heritage sector. And we work towards a fair representation and the inclusion of cultural, intellectual, and creative contributions from people of color in the cultural sector. We challenge and work to deconstruct systems of inequalities that exist to enable a sector where the workforce and audience is reflective of the UK's 21st century population, which is not the case at the moment. I'd like to say Museum Detox started in 2014. However, I only joined a couple of years ago. The network is important because, as I said, we are a collective. It's not just, we don't have anyone at the top, even though we have like a stirring group made of volunteers, but everyone has a voice. And even though we work at challenging the sector, we are more, our work is more about empowering and looking after the well-being of our members who work in the sector. And also one last thing about it is that we're very intersectional. So people of color is not a monolith expression. So we have people with disabilities such as myself, and people in front of house roles such as myself. And we also have people in, you know, back office and you know, higher paid jobs. But yeah, so we're quite a mixture of individuals, and we stand together to make things change in the sector, because on our own we won't be as strong as with a group, and also the wealth of ideas will be richer. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for introducing yourselves and sharing why your groups are founded and why they are important to the sector today. And I wanted to sort of move on with a lot of our reasons for finding these groups is because we felt there was nothing representing a specific group, and felt that we had the energy to be part of that. And the work on many grassroots networks has been around advocacy and making the sector aware of problems, of issues. And I wanted to build on that. How do grassroots networks, hold the sector to account? What examples do you have from your organizations of holding the sector to account? I guess I wanted to go back to you, Sina, on this, and on what work yourself and Museum Detox do to hold the sector to account.
Thank you. So one of the ways in which we are looking to hold the sector to account is by establishing a benchmark, and that is something that is in progress. We haven't got it just yet, but we are regularly approached by employers who seek to up their diversity, and they kind of ask us to advertise jobs, for example. And sometimes we get alerted by our members that actually these very employers have been acting in a very discriminatory and non-satisfactory fashion. So there is a need to really go back and kind of investigate the EDI policies of each employer. We cannot just push the adverts like that and say, oh, here's a job, and we have a duty of care for our membership, and especially if we know that a certain employer is not doing very well in terms of equality and diversity and inclusion, we will work with them to improve. We will certainly not do the work for them because also it's quite a lot of emotional labor, for us. So let's put it this way: we will work with whoever wants to have better diversity within their organization. However, we will not do the work for them, and our priority will always be our members and their well-being. Yeah, I think that's about it.
And I think that also demonstrates how, as you mentioned in your introduction, around the intersectionality of our networks. Ashleigh, at FoHMuseums Jobs, your organisation is founded to advocate for in making the sector fairer in the job market, to make sure, for example, against exclusive recruitment practices. How else does FoHMuseums Jobs try and hold the sector to account?
Well, I think, our philosophy, I think in the past, there's been kind of this, it seems it's this taboo idea around talking about things like salary, talking about things like recruitment, working conditions, it's sort of seen as this there's kind of this politics of civility around talking about sort of hot button topics like that. And we completely reject that premise. So, job descriptions and job advertisements are public documents. And so we, have a right to publicly comment on them. And so, we're not shy about calling out what we see as exclusionary practices based on our manifesto. So things like requiring expensive university degrees if they're not necessarily needed for the job, requiring things like salary transparency, so making sure a salary is listed on a job description, you know, things like promising possibilities of extensions to contracts, but not actually being able to provide them. So we look in detail at a lot of these kind of exclusionary practices, and we've laid out in our manifesto and on our website all the reasons why these do exclude, in particular, working class people, people of color, women, and you know, all the groups that we see either underrepresented or in other ways kind of discriminated against in our sector. So yeah, I think for us, you know, some people think that we're quite bold and brash sometimes, especially online, but you know, I think for a very long time, the job sector in museums has been very one-sided, and all the power's kind of been on one side with employers. And I think one thing that we're trying to do is just kind of rebalance that a bit. And ultimately, it's going to be for the benefit of everyone, right? Because if we have a more inclusive, diverse workforce, like what Sina was saying, then we're going to, you know, have museums that are going to be more resilient and more relevant in the future. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I hope it does.
It definitely highlights the breadth of the issues, but also how a lot of the challenges facing a sector unify grassroots networks. So not just us five here today, but across many of the other grassroots networks as well. And of course, exclusionary recruitment practices do make it harder for people, both who've had poor mental health in the past, but also people who are from working class backgrounds. Michelle, with Museums Muck, how does your group work to advocate for people from working class backgrounds and hold the sector to account?
So we also have a manifesto which states kind of our push for change and how we go about that. In terms of holding the sector to account on the theme of class, we call out class-based injustices across the sector and the underrepresentation and treatment of working class people in our profession. I think that what we've done is to make class very visible in the sector. It can be, class is something that can be hidden and oppressed very easily. It's not a protected characteristic under law. So we feel like we're making the working class voice heard as a collective. We do, I think the network has empowered working class individuals to speak out for themselves. We've given people confidence to be themselves in the sector. We've given people kind of evidence, you know, real, which people have said, you know, having these kind of stats research and examples is really useful to us in getting things across to the sector. So we offer that kind of solidarity as well. But we also, as Ashleigh mentioned earlier, you know, and especially for working class people, it can be a stereotype that you're a troublemaker and you're angry and you're making things difficult. So we also can act as that kind of collective voice so that people don't feel like they are putting themselves at risk in what is, you know, and obviously at the moment a very risky work environment in terms of keeping your job, for example.
Thank you. I think that the notion of empowering is across our networks. And for many of us, this is an additional labour beyond our roles. And obviously that does potentially affect wellness. And like for myself, I admit that I had to take steps back to reduce my workload to make sure that I'm not burning out, I'm not overreaching. How important has been founding Museum Wellness and also sharing that, making it normal to talk about wellness, Sam?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a balancing act because, as you say, this is something I do in my spare time, along with Anne Sharman, our other founder. We both have full-time jobs and we're doing this on top of it. And if anyone is a member of the network, if they follow us on Twitter, you'll see that it's peaks and troughs how much we engage, because if there's too much going on in the outside world, you always have to sort of take a step back to look after your own mental health. but it's also, I think it's had a huge impact on people's awareness of how many other people in the sector are facing the same issues. I like what Michelle said about offering that solidarity, and I think all of our sector, all of our grassroots networks sort of have that impact on the sector, that we're offering solidarity, and not just within our own networks, but for everyone in the sector to know that they're not alone in mental health issues. They're not alone in being a person of colour or working class or having faced really poor recruitment practices. And they are really intersectional issues. So almost the impact of, I think, all of our grassroots networks is actually in the people that engage with us, and that we're giving those people a voice in a unified way. I mean, I work at the Museum of Democracy, so I'm very pro-union, but people have more power when they stick together and they work together. I think we're almost a conduit for that.
No, I completely agree. I think networks like this can act as a focal point to echo voices in the sector. They can offer a perspective from and actually advocate through a network and build up momentum through these networks. I think that's a really powerful element to them. And as we've seen, all these groups here were founded within the last decade, within the last 7 years. Do you think we're still expanding? Do you think there's more grassroots networks? We are by no means the only grassroots networks. There are tens, potentially hundreds across the wider museum sector. Do you think the sector needs more grassroots networks, Ashleigh?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I guess I'll try to talk generally, and then I'll just mention specifically about FMJ. But I'm sure there are plenty of issues that are not currently being brought to the fore by grassroots organizations, which probably should be. The nature of grassroots organizations is they tend to kind of pop up in a space that needs to be filled. But I think it's also, and I think some of the other panelists have already mentioned this, I think it was Sina who mentioned that it's also important that we need to have solidarity and work together. And, rather than, I think it's kind of having that balance between having a really wide pluralistic kind of grassroots movement that has lots of different views and ideas and issues kind of raised, but then at the same time not spreading ourselves too thin, and making sure that we're working together, that we're pooling resources and pooling our voices, because that way we're much more effective. And then just specifically about fair museum jobs, this sounds a bit funny to say, but I think in an ideal museum sector, fair museum jobs wouldn't need to exist. We're here because the sector does not recruit or treat workers in an inclusive or just way. And we love the work that we do, and we know that we make a positive impact. But we would love it also if there weren't as many organizations that we needed to call out. So in a way, we're working towards making things better. And who knows, maybe one day in a perfect world we'll be obsolete.
That's a really great point, Ashleigh. That's a great point. We're here because of an issue we've identified and feel that needs to change. If that issue wasn't there would be much less grassroots networks, and you wouldn't have to be doing this. Sam, do you agree? Do you think that we need more networks, or do we need something different?
I think I definitely agree that with time it'll fluctuate and change as some of the issues that we've raised are hopefully corrected. But I think that the big thing with grassroots networks, like you said, it's people filling an area where they see a gap. So I think the sector could have as many of people think that they need to be able to connect with others. Obviously, there's so many different grassroots networks doing different things and working in different ways that you can't possibly list them all. But I think there's always space for more if there's something that's connecting people in the sector that they want to be tangible. I think there's always space to set up a new network.
Sina, you, as in the introduction, you discussed how the intersectionality of grassroots networks. Do you think there's a different direction for grassroots networks to take going forward rather than more networks?
Thanks, Will. I personally think we have we have all the networks that we need at the moment. I mean, obviously, I don't know of every single initiative. Certainly, there's always space for more initiatives from individuals. And that is always welcome. Like, museums are not neutral, and mass action. So I'm in favor and not in favor. Like other people say, I think it was Ashleigh who said, yeah, we need to basically stick together. I think that would make us stronger. And also, I'm always a little bit wary of, you know, us reproducing without knowing it, but reproducing, like using the master's tools to basically deconstruct the master's house, as Audre Lorde said. So basically, there is always a risk with networks that you will start to reproduce the format that is out there with leadership, with, you know, like a certain hierarchy. And that is something that I don't want to see happen. And that's why it's very important to me that in Museum Detox, we're all equal. And I'm going to put in the chat an article which I really liked reading a while back. And it was about a co-founder from Black Lives Matter, and basically their take on leadership and how they had stepped away now because it's a movement. It's not, you know, it's not that there isn't a leader in Black Lives Matter. And I like this idea of every one of us being a leader, you know, if no one else is around. And also we have a lot more, I could potentially be part of every single network on this panel, you know, I can. I have everything that I need because of my intersectionality. And I am interested in being part of them. However, I think the real richness is going to be found in us collaborating together, because Museum as Muck and Museum Detox, if they have two separate ideas, it will always be more weak than if we come together and work on a project together. That will make us a lot stronger.
Thank you, Sina. I think that's really powerful in terms of bringing networks together rather than going down into minute details of each and every group. Michelle, with Museums Muck, do you think that is a route forward as well, and that increased collaboration, sharing resources, I guess saving time and energy as well by bringing people together?
Yes, absolutely. I think, you know, we are all in agreement here that collaboration is strength. Just to echo what some of the others have said, though, of course, you know, if you want to connect with others on an issue and form a network, of course, go ahead. But Museum as Muck is really interested in collaboration with other grassroots networks or other types of groups or organization. It's about, you know, what are the aims that we have in common and what are we united by? And in fact, what we're united by is structural disadvantage and systemic barriers. We all are unfortunately united by some kind of oppression or discrimination. So how can we, you know, collaborate on that? And like Sina says, you know, if we are all doing this individually, and there is space, we do all, of course, still need those kind of separate kind of spaces to have conversations around particular things like mental health or class. Of course, they do all overlap as well. But, you know, it's not necessarily that we don't need these networks or that we don't need more, but what we do need is collaboration, I think. Obviously, like Ashleigh said, the aim would be to not need any of us. And I think, you know, Museum as Muck would love to explore the questions around, like, what does a museum look like that doesn't systemically oppress people in these ways?
Thank you. I think this shows a unity amongst the networks, that desire to enact change and to challenge the current models of organizations. To, as Sina said, enable all of us to be leaders. And I think grassroots networks are demonstrating alternative paths to change, but also developing new ways for leadership to take place. And of course, over time, there may be different issues which come up which need another network. Of course, as we've seen here, the best way forward is to, if you are creating a new network, is to embrace the other networks and work as a collective to enact change. But what, Sam, would you advise to anyone who is thinking of setting up a network, or to actually join an established network and get more involved with the operation of it? What would you advise? What were the challenges when you set it up?
I think one of the main challenges I had was that, especially very early on when there weren't that many networks around, people didn't realise that it's voluntary. They were quite surprised if I went to a conference and mentioned my other job. So be prepared for people to expect a bit more than you can deliver, and don't take that personally. But also, I think the big thing for me is don't be afraid to shift and change if you're founding a new network. When I set up Museum Wellness Network, my idea was something more towards what Museum Detox were doing at the time, creating a safe space for people to come together and talk. But then that's not what it became, because that's not what people actually needed. People weren't in the situation where they felt comfortable being that open. So what we realized we needed to do was to create that culture of safety within the sector, to actually have these conversations. And that's why we're much more signposting. We do blogs and we share people's stories, and we've got a Facebook page for people to come together and talk if they want to. But the collaborative space for people to discuss issues wasn't suiting us, so we changed. And I think that's the thing, like, you might start off idealizing a different system that one of the other networks has, but that doesn't necessarily work for you. So just bin it and try something new.
That's a fantastic point, Sam. I think accepting that it's a blank canvas and that it's going to take its own destiny, reflecting the issue you're tackling, but also the people involved. And that's something I can really resonate with. When we founded Front of House Museums, we didn't know where it would go. It came out of an energy to support and value Front of House. I guess we expected that there'd be plenty of data available on Front of House, and we quickly found out that the data didn't really tailor to what we wanted. So we had to then do surveys, which has helped us evolve and helped us understand the sector more, but also given us the chance to demonstrate why Front of House in museums needed to be here. And I guess that sort of development is organic. Ashleigh, how did you find that, and what advice would you give to anyone looking to get involved?
Yeah, I mean, some of the things that you and Sam have already mentioned, I think, just being very mindful of time and capacity. These things do often take more time than you realize, and if you're part of a grassroots organization or looking to join one or start one, you're obviously very passionate about what you do. And I think, and you're probably very committed as well. And it's easy for that to kind of lead to burnout, when actually you'll probably be much more useful to the movement that you're trying to start if you kind of take care of yourself and just be realistic about what you can achieve within a given week or a given month or whatever it is. Asking for help, collaborating is always really useful as well. I think also having clearly defined goals, but as Sam and Will, you both mentioned, also being willing to kind of look at those again if it's not really working, but having an idea in your head of what you want to achieve, which, through our manifesto, I think was a really good process of actually writing it to kind of get to that point, to really crystallize what we're looking for in terms of museum recruitment. And I just wanted to pick up very quickly on something that Sam mentions about kind of the structure, and I completely completely agree about, you know, you don't need to replicate kind of structures, organizational structures that we see around us. You know, a lot of museums, and in fact, most organizations have a kind of very hierarchical, kind of clearly defined structure that's often based around kind of, you know, capitalism in some way. You know, it's all about the boss and the people who to tell and the people who do as they're told, right? And certainly at Fair Museum Jobs, that's not how we operate at all. We're, you know, a completely kind of self-organized and democratic and very collaborative group. You know, there's not one person who makes a decision. We all come to decisions together. We talk about things, and we're still able to operate in a very efficient, you know, quick manner. So I think, you know, one thing, the value of organizations like the one on this panel and others is to show, you know, there's other ways of organizing yourselves. You know, you don't need to kind of replicate these very hierarchical, patriarchal and kind of profit focused structures of organization. You know, you can find something that works for you.
Yeah, that's really empowering. And I think that knowledge of not having to conform to a standard, I think is really, really brilliant advice in terms of not going in there expecting to do something, because if I knew I had to do something in a certain format, I would have probably shied away from doing it. That flexibility gave me the chance to embrace it. And I guess, Michelle, with the development of Museums Muck, you've got a manifesto just like Fair Museum Jobs. For anyone writing a manifesto, what would you advise? Is there any challenges to that?
Good question. I think, you know, you don't have to have a manifesto. Like, you know, I think the point that we're making is this is your grassroots network, your grassroots group. We decided on it when the network had been running for a little while, and kind of we just evolved organically, and there were kind of a few people who kind of naturally formed in, who had the time and resource to be a bit more involved, who formed a bit of a steering group, but we still consult our wider network on what we do. And the way that we approached forming the manifesto was to consult with a group on, first and foremost, what our values were. So it's a values-led manifesto. And then from that, we created our kind of points of action for the manifesto, which is about what we're doing, how we're doing it. So it's not, I mean, we didn't necessarily find it difficult because everyone wanted to contribute, you know, and we wanted to have everybody's voices heard. And actually, as you'll probably find, people are generally on the same page about what we're aiming to achieve, and that's both within your network, but even across our networks. There's so many commonalities. So, you know, a manifesto is something that, you know, is what we're using currently. Like Ashleigh says, we're evolving all the time. So we'll be revisiting that manifesto, you know, soon. You know, hoping to go into the new year feeling a bit more refreshed and a bit more responsive to what's been going on. So yeah, I think I've answered that.
Thank you, Michelle. And I think that's a really good point to remember, that manifestos aren't permanent either. They are constantly evolving, just like our organizations. And I'm looking forward to seeing how all of our networks grow and expand and collaborate in the future. But of course, many people who will be wanting to join will be joining organizations which are already established. Sina, as you said, you joined Museum Detox once it had been established. How did you find that process, and what advice would you give to anyone who's looking to join an established network and get involved?
So yeah, what I will actually take your question the other way around, if you don't mind me asking. Sure. I am all for the process of, I think our networks, like someone in the chat said somewhere, they can be quite obscure, you know, and also because they're run by volunteers, like Sam said, and Michelle and Ashleigh, you know, you're not always on Twitter. You're not always able to respond to like a million messages on the email thread. So you can easily bypass a message, not bypass, but miss a message from someone who is interested in joining your network. So the way around it is, for me, I think each one of our detoxers, as we call ourselves, or I call myself, I like to go and adopt a new member and bring them in, you know, and that way it's a lot more, it's a warmer way to extend the network to someone. And also recently I wrote a blog which is about to be published on the museum detox website, and it's about basically embracing a lot more front of house kind of stuff, because sometimes within museum detox it did feel, at times it did feel that it was, I don't know, we had quite a lot of curators in the network. We had a lot of people who worked in kind of stable, quite well paid jobs, you know, maybe not as well paid as, you know, their white counterparts, but still not front of house, 0-hour contract. So this is something that was really important to me. And I personally make it my duty to go and fetch people. And that's the way to do it. But just one quick word about well-being. It's very, very important for me. And I do campaign across mental health charities, and all that. Always put yourself first, and basically, don't, being involved in these networks, you can easily burn out. So basically, if you want to help the group, go and have a lie down if that's what you need to do.
Brilliant, thank you, Sina.
Put yourself first and you'll be helping the group. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. I think that's really sort of showed the different ways in, but also how supportive networks can be in bringing people in, and also constantly thinking about their identity and what they represent. And I think, for example, Sina, talking about front of house, I'm really looking forward to seeing that blog post and the discussion around front of house. We're going to move now into a short question and answer phase, and I'll bring up some of the questions asked in the chat already. And I guess I'll start with the first two questions. I'm going to try and merge them into one question. Whoever feels like they want to answer, feel free to come up first. How can sector bodies and what, like, established sector bodies and organizations such as museums actually work with organizations to change them? I guess we've already heard from Sina talking about how museum detox work with organizations. I think that was an important point Sina made at the start around not sharing, not doing too much because of the emotional labor involved in that process. And I want to get your thoughts on how our networks can share more.
I'll kick off with how organizations, how sector bodies and museums can do more and do the work. First off, they need to listen. I think, especially with the other networks here, they've already done so much work in highlighting what the issues are and how to correct them. Like Fair Museum Jobs is a great example where they've got a manifesto explicitly explaining point by point what the problems are with sector recruitment and how to correct them. So museums just need to listen and pay attention to that. And sector bodies as well, both need to listen, but also need to help make space for people. I know we're at the Museum Association conference, and so all of us have been given space to share our stories. But I think that's part of what sector bodies can do, is highlight that these grassroots networks are there, and by allowing us to speak at events and share stories, it's already starting to change the culture. So I think just continuing to do that, and listen.
Can I add on to that, Will?
Of course, go ahead.
Just very quickly, yeah. No, I think I completely agree with Sam, and I think on top of listening, also, yeah, all of our organizations and many of the other grassroots organizations in the sector, rightly challenge museums and sector bodies sometimes. And I think it's important to not view this as just kind of negativity or just kind of unmitigated criticism, to not be defensive about those criticisms. The reason that we might be pointing out like an unfair salary range or just an inaccessible job description or something like that is because we care about the sector and we want to make it better and we want to help that organization and the sector as a whole. So I think it's about not being defensive, not seeing us as an enemy, not seeing us as these like annoying nags on the side of your shoulder, that we want to work with you. We want to make things better. We're not your adversaries, and work with us. And we want to help and we want to see improvement, and we can't do that without organizations and sector bodies.
No, I agree. There's an opportunity to really echo. Michelle?
Sorry, I just wanted to add on, and it's just adding to what people have already said, but museums and sector organisations, we're not knocking on the door to be allowed in. Like, the power should not be yours, and it is not yours. Use that power, platform, privilege, whatever it is, to remove systemic oppression. It's a matter of social justice, and your organisation, your museum is no good to society if it doesn't serve all parts of society. That was it.
Great, thank you. I actually got a specific question for you, Michelle. Do you know if Museum Detox has a different level of representation in organisations which have more of a focus on a working class heritage?
Yeah, Museums, Muck, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Now, I suppose the first thing to say about it is there's very little research and evidence around class representation in our sector. There's some that we can use, some that we can work with, but it's all quite light touch, and it doesn't really dig down into these smaller questions. I would say that we think that in regional and industrial museums, there is more of a working class representation in the workforce because they are, embedded into that community. But the issue is still that the leadership positions, the people making decisions, are not from that working class community. But more evidence needs to be produced on this. And like we're saying, Museums Muck does not have the resources to produce that evidence. This is up to other museum bodies to do.
Yeah, that's a really important point you've made there, in that these organisations are voluntary. There is limited capacity, and for real change to take place, there has to move beyond us and become the normal rather than us raising our voices. I'm going to move to another question now, and I guess I start. I'll go to Sina first. Since you've joined Museum Detox, have you noticed any changes which has taken place because of the network or because of the people in it?
Yes, I have noticed some changes. For example, when there was the murder of George Floyd, we saw that organizations were kind of looking at each other and kind of following each other in making a statement. This is something that maybe, making that statement is something that maybe a few years ago, even a few months ago, organizations wouldn't have done. So we welcome this, but we welcome this not in a posturing kind of way. It needs to be something authentic. But I would say the most important change I have seen is in our members, really, and is in myself, and is in feeling empowered, basically, because I'm not holding my breath for the sector to change. However, I'm changing myself, my expectations, and also I think I have felt quite empowered being part of the network, and that has changed me from the inside, which means that my relationship with institutions has changed too. I don't know if it answers your question.
No, I think it definitely does. I think it really highlights the power on the individual and on the sector level, how change can take place. And I think that's something I felt much more able to, with being part of FoHMuseums Museums and being part of other networks, I felt that when I see these networks doing these activities, FoHMuseums jobs, calling out unfair practices, or museum as much bringing together groups and sharing content and going to events and being awarded funding, it's really demonstrated to me the small changes which give me energy. How does that, is that something you feel when you are part of these networks?
Sorry, are you still asking me?
Well, I guess anyone. I guess Sina. I guess is that what you feel? And that's what you felt. You felt that the energy.
Yeah, I feel that the energy is changing, and I feel that especially with the very sad massive cull we're seeing at the moment with all the redundancies, mainly within front of house staff, we're seeing that organizations have to be held responsible, and also they have to really fight to stay relevant, because someone recently said that maybe the whole the whole current situation would get rid of dead wood, obviously dead wood like myself and other people who got who were made redundant. And maybe with this dead wood we can go and build a much better house somewhere else. We are the force and the diversity of this sector, and maybe the sector is going to become a boring old place without us, and they're starting to miss us very soon.
Yes. Yes.
Can I just add on? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to add on to what Sina said. It was, yeah, I think it was Grace and Perry who said that, by the way. Interesting comment. But yeah, I think one other thing that's I think is really interesting that when we were meeting before this panel started today is that 3 of the organizations on this panel were all started in the same year in 2018. And so I think that shows you, I mean, Museum Detox is really kind of was really the vanguard with, how early they've started, and I think are also one of the biggest. So they're an organization that I think the rest of us really look up to in many ways. But yeah, I think the fact that so many of us have proliferated since 2018 tells you that, yeah, the balance of power is maybe shifting a little bit, or, at least the ball is rolling ever so slowly. And I think even coronavirus and redundancies can't stop that from happening. And yeah, I think who knows what kind of catalysts for change will appear, but there's definitely some energy going on there for sure.
Thank you. We've only got a few minutes left, so I'm going to move into our closing, I guess, speeches, comments. I guess, so I really wanted to highlight other networks who aren't on the panel today. So if we all perhaps share one other network who really is important to you, or 2 if you've got 2, but please share them in the chat as well. We want to get as many networks as possible. Share on Twitter as well. Get all these networks the credit they definitely deserve. For me, another network which I've been really part of over this year has been HVG, the Heritage Volunteering Group, who've really helped support volunteer managers and people involved in the volunteering side of the museum sector. There's many others as well, and I will hand over to the other 4, and if we go through in the same order we introduced ourselves. But also, please let us know what you've got in store for us as well. One little sneak hint of what your group is doing next.
Okay, I'll try to be as fast as I can. So you did say I could do two. So two networks that I want to give a shout out to are one is called Show the Salary, which does similar work to us in promoting salary transparency across the entire charitable sector. And the other one is Art Not Oil, which is a coalition for ending fossil fuel industry sponsorship in the arts. And one thing that you can look forward to from Fair Museum Jobs, which is very exciting, is we actually have our very first conference, our very first Fair Museum Jobs Careers Summit coming up the week of the 23rd of November. It's going to be totally online. It's going to be totally free. We're going to have some amazing speakers and panels, just like some of the ones you've seen today. So keep an eye out for announcements about the panels and the speakers, and also registration will start later this month. So you can go to our website for more details.
I'm also going to do two. So Museums DCN, which is the Disability Collaborative Network, they're now a part of a larger organisation, I think, but it really shows the difference that you can make in through a grassroots network. That they started out grassroots and they're now actually changing the sector and making it better and more accessible for people with disabilities. And also all the Space Invaders groups. So these are groups to encourage women leadership within museums. I'm going to the launch of the North event next week, so I'm really looking forward to that. And we will mostly be trying to survive the next few months. Obviously today is a very stressful day for many reasons to do with the wider world, but I think it goes back to that giving time for yourself. We're in the middle of a pandemic. I'm not going to promise to do much because it's really exhausting.
I feel you, Sam. Yeah, a network that Museums Muck wants to shout out is called Common, and it's actually in the theatre world and not the museum world, and they do a similar thing for working class people in the theatre sector. I think it's really good for us as a sector to look outside. Museums can be very insular. We've received the Activist Award. We were one of the recipients of the Activist Award last year. So we're using that to consult other colleagues, working class colleagues in across the arts sector to inform our work. But it's always good to look externally. For example, the finance sector are way ahead of museums in working class representation. So, you know, not a good look. What's coming up for Museums Muck? We hopefully will really soon have our very first website up and running. So do look out for that in the next couple of weeks. It's a really exciting time for us. We're recruiting for new steering group members, so please do get in touch. And of course, we are just looking forward to collaborating with other people, other networks, other organizations, and taking power back to the roots.
Thank you. My network, it's not really, yeah, it is a network. It is called the Federation of International Human Rights Museum. So as its name rightly says, it's a group of basically international museums who stand for human rights. And I find them really inspirational, and they had a conference lately, but they have lots of resources, and it's a really great network to get stuck in. Thank you.
And is anything Museum Detox is doing in the next few weeks?
So in the next few weeks, I personally look after the well-being of the members, and I have written an email which is about to be sent, calling for a working group to be organized around well-being and to create some resources for our members' well-being. The second thing that's going to happen, we are working towards establishing ways to have some kind of benchmark for organizations. So again, we'll call out to the network to come and participate, to help us kind of rate museums and find ways to rate these museums using lots of different tools. And yeah, my blog is gonna come out soon, and that's it. We're just being present for our members at this moment. A lot of our members are really struggling because obviously there's a pandemic and it's affecting us disproportionately. And yeah, so just taking it, rolling with the punches, taking it one day at a time. And yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sina.
Thank you.
So thank you everyone for joining our session today, Power to the Roots. Today we've heard from some amazing people, Ashleigh, Sam, Michelle and Sina. Thank you for giving your time and energy to being part of this discussion. As the sector goes through unprecedented changes, grassroots networks will continue to be a voice representing museum workers along many others. They offer an alternative route to navigate around established power structures to work towards change and hold the sector to account. In this world turned upside down, change does not need to come from the top. Change can come from all of us. Grassroots networks are by no means the only alternative way to advocate for change. However, each grassroots network is another potential way for change. Together, these alternatives are building the pressure for fundamental change to a sector. As a sector workforce, we have the ability to call for change. The power for change is in unity. That is in all of us. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed our session.
Thank you so much, William. That was such an inspiring session. You can really see that in the chat. There's just so many people found that really useful, and it was really inspiring to hear how kind of courageous you've all been and how much change you've brought already with the work that you're doing. So thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you so much for to everyone who attended this session as well. I'm just going to pause for a moment here to let anyone copy and paste the chat if they want to keep hold of it, because there were some really useful links and comments in there as well. So do please do that. Next up, we have one of our in-practice sessions, which is called Keywords Courage, and that will discuss how museums are practicing courage through their digital practice during the pandemic, and that starts at 4 p.m. Don't forget the MA's virtual hub is also open until 5 p.m. So please pop along there after this session if you'd like to meet MA staff or other delegates for an informal face-to-face chat. Thank you again, everyone, and bye for now. Thank you.